Hey, story makers, and welcome to Tellwell the podcast, where Duncan and I are inviting you into the conversations that we get to have on a daily basis with our story makers. Our story makers are our clients and our friends in the industry who we just love sharing the stories of. With me, as always, is one of my very favorite storytellers, Duncan Williamson.
Hello. How's it going?
Hi, Duncan. It's a great day. So, being this is podcast number 1, how are you feeling coming into your new co-hosting duties?
I'm very excited for it, first of all. I think it's very fun. I also was thinking back to when we originally bought these microphones and this table and set it all up, I think 2.5 years ago. And we're finally here. We've finally done it, which is very exciting.
Today's guest is actually like one of the most incredible nonprofit executive directors that I know, Jill Christopher, who's the executive director of Ronald McDonald House Charities here in Fargo. And some of the conversation today is going to be around how they've really like transformed their signature event, the Sweetheart Ball. And we talk about everything from the importance of food to like the connection that we make with food, because the same thing that we ate there was what everybody at the house ate that night. And maybe I shouldn't be giving that much away. But I'd be curious, because one of the, curious to your take, one of the maybe most interesting things about Ronald McDonald House over the years has been their transition from having people like be on stage to highlighting those families and those family stories with the power of video. And so those of you that don't know, Duncan is our senior film producer, and he has been behind the camera of capturing some of the most amazing stories that we've had the opportunity to tell in the history of Tellwell. So I'd be curious, Duncan, to your both academic but also very practical reasoning for like, why does video and like the visuals and the audio and all the different things put together, why do those resonate so much more than just like somebody delivering an in-person address?
Well, I think there's so many reasons why. I think the first thing that immediately pops to my mind is like all of the tools, all the abilities we have in post-production to emphasize story and to make things feel really like, as a viewer, you feel the weight of it. I think one of the most obvious ones, thinking about an event of 200 people, it's a fundraising event, somebody standing up at a podium. If you're not at one of the first 3 or 4 tables, you're going to have a hard time just even registering their facial expressions. And maybe you have live event video so they can put a close-up on screen or something like that. But when we do video, we've got a big screen up at the front. Maybe there's 2 or 3 of them throughout the room, so everybody has a good view of what's being played. You have audio there as well, but that idea of being close to someone, and you can do that through video, especially when we talk about interviews, when we talk about even just those really cute moments of a kid on camera. You don't get that intimacy, basically, out of somebody who's just standing up on a podium and talking. And what's neat about especially the work we do with RMHC is we're working with kids, and kids really like, a lot of them like to ham it up for the camera. They like to engage. They like to like look right at the camera. They like to kind of perform a little bit. And that's something that we all get enjoyment out of. And so I think one of the cool things that RMHC has also done is they've been able to acknowledge like the work that they do can be very heavy, or the treatment that maybe families or a kid is going through that brings them into their doors can be really hard and heavy. And that's one emotion, but that's not the only emotion. And like being able to tell stories that have the full width of emotions, where we get to see kids laughing and having a great time, being able to have that experience as a viewer where you might start out and you get to learn about this great kid that's like going through this difficult time. You see them playing around with a sibling and it's all lovely and the whole room giggles. And then you get to the part where kind of like the other shoe drops and you hear about the more challenging aspects. And so like within a 3-minute time frame, give or take a little bit, we can bring people on this really like emotional journey with us and give them a much more intimate look into the lives of somebody, whether that's because they're at a podium, right? It's just mom at a podium versus getting to see the whole family, or whether that's because this family's in Montana and they're not necessarily going to make it down for the event. And so I think that's a pretty long-winded answer, but I think the way that like video can be so much more powerful is because we can do those things and we can add in those layers of music and color correction and all of these other graphics and other ways we can emphasize certain moments and certain beats in a story to really let the viewer like understand and sit with the emotion that they're being presented with.
I could not agree more. And I think the other kind of big differentiator, and I don't want this to sound like a promo piece for us, but I think one of the other big differentiators is kind of our approach to documentary style filmmaking versus what a lot of I've seen a lot happen in these nonprofit style gala events or gala style nonprofit events where it feels very scripted, it feels very forced, the camera's a long ways away, like just some of those little nuances that you just talked about aren't there. And I think one thing that Ronald McDonald House has done exceptionally well is let the story play out as it's going to play out. Right? They don't have like their ulterior motive is to share the authentic story of whatever family they're talking to. And it's through that authenticity that donors really make the connection, right? They have that intimate view into the family's life for even a day. And that connection is really what makes people take out their pocketbooks too.
Yeah. Well, and I think that documentary style, that's something we talk a lot about. The way we approach most of our video work is from that lens. And there's a few key things that happen with that. One of them is like you mentioned, you get to kind of feel like you're a fly on the wall. You're like just getting to observe this family, going about their day, going about their interactions, whatever that might be. But you also have, and we talk about like that hero's journey framework, is we're putting that family at the center of what this piece is, right? It's about them. It's about their experience. It's about them beyond the walls of RMHC. And RMHC is just that guide that comes in throughout the process to help them get to their final destination, right? And so we're not beating people over the head like RMHC this whole video. Like we're asking you to see the people that are affected by this. And then at the end of it, and this is one of the great reasons that video can be integrated into like that programming of a whole evening, is you time that up, you have the opportunity then to immediately after that video make that connection by an executive director or somebody standing up there that can then share a little bit of like, what's the connection to what we're doing tonight, to the fundraising, to the cash call, whatever that might be. And I think that's a big part of also why that nonprofit work can be so powerful is when you start to try to remove that nonprofit from the focus and focus on the people they serve as the reality of why we are all watching this and why we care about it. Because if you care about the people they serve, you're going to care about the mission and the organization.
Amen. Well, people are probably very excited to hear more from Jill. Like I said, this was an incredible conversation. And so without further ado, Ronald McDonald House Executive Director, Jill Christopher. Here we go. Hi, Jill Christopher, and welcome to Tellwell the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
I love it. So, Jill, for people that don't know you, you are the Executive Director and CEO at Ronald McDonald House Charities of the Red River Valley. You're one of our very favorite causes that we get to work with on a almost daily basis here at Tellwell. But for those people that don't know who Jill is, who is Jill?
Oh, who is Jill? So I've been with Ronald McDonald House for almost 14 years. And so that is a big part of who makes me Jill. But outside of that, I am a mom. I am a wife. I am a person who loves going to the lake and loves helping other people and jumping in and just enjoying the summer weather, things like that. Yeah.
I love it. I also feel like it needs to be said as we are going into like 50 and 60 degree days, like we're all thinking of summer. We're all thinking of lake, and we just
80 degrees tomorrow. It is going to be
Really?
80 degrees tomorrow, and I am here for it. I am here for it.
I'm very excited about that. Somehow I have not been watching the weather.
I think it's why we live here, though, right? Because it makes you appreciate the summer so much more.
You're damn right.
I love it.
So for those people that don't know what Ronald McDonald House is, you said that was a big part of also you, which I appreciate that as like a fellow kind of like leader of an organization, that like it's a big part of not just the work we do, but the who we are. And I think some therapists say that that's not okay, but I think it's A-okay.
Yeah. But I think for me, one of the things I love to tell about the Ronald McDonald House, so when I was little, my mom would have us collect pop tabs and we put them in a little house. And you kind of had an idea of what that was helping and like you knew you were doing something good. And then I met my now husband, and his nephew had a kidney transplant. Right about the time that we started dating, his nephew had a kidney transplant and was in the hospital, and they stayed in Ronald McDonald House. And so we got to see firsthand what that made a difference. So I think that is why I say it's such a big part of me is like I've seen it for, my family. I've seen it for close friends and that haven't stayed at the Ronald McDonald House I work at, but other spaces around the U.S., and you get to see that and see those stories. And so it makes a big difference. But for those of you who aren't familiar, we provide housing and support for families who have kids in the hospital. So people who have babies that were born too early, children who have cancer, need surgery, they were in a car accident, whatever the case might be. We help with eating disorders, feeding therapy, all sorts of medical reasons. They can come and stay at the Ronald McDonald House or use our Ronald McDonald Family Room to just find a bit of respite. That care, that place that somebody's going to say, what can I do to help you today? It's clean. We have volunteers that come in and cook meals for the families. So they have all of these things that make them feel at home. And then the biggest part I love is this community that it builds. We can have, at our Ronald McDonald House, we can have up to 24 families a night. So when you have 24 families, there's somebody to connect with. So when you have a child with an eating disorder, you might not be going out on GoFundMe or CaringBridge and telling the world what's going on. There's still a lot of things we're working through to get more open about those kind of mental health and medical diagnoses. And within our walls, everybody's child is sick. So there's somebody you can relate to. There's somebody there's people that are on different parts of the journey. You've watched someone who is a newly diagnosed child that was, just coming out of the NICU and is going to have some pretty big complications going out of the NICU. And you have a mom she's been down that road. They're way down the road, and you can watch them share those different things back and forth, and the weight get lifted off of people's shoulders as they know there's other people that can give them some advice or a hug or just be a listening ear. And it's really powerful to watch.
It's an incredible organization, and it's one of my favorite in this town. But I think one of the things that makes you so unique, and I think part of the success of the Ronald McDonald House, both from a fundraising perspective, but also in a community awareness, is that you came to Ronald McDonald House with a business mindset.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? You were a badass business boss.
I don't know about that, but I came out of financial services. Yeah, I was not in a nonprofit before this. So worked in financial services business, and I think that did give you a really unique mindset. I think there's a lot of people that maybe don't understand. I mean, a nonprofit is a business just like any other business on the street. We have staff we need to pay, we have bills we pay, but you need to network and you need to find business and you need to find people. The only difference is for the people that I'm connecting with on a fundraising standpoint, I'm asking you to just give your hard-earned money that you're working hard to earn at your job to support a family you probably don't even know. And so we're really going for that good feeling in your heart. But at the end of the day, a lot of it's really similar. So yeah, I really do credit a lot of my business background to really making me understand this business a lot faster when I got into nonprofits.
Well, I think as we've grown together over the last 10 years, because I think you were Tellwell's number 2 client.
I hope so.
Number 1 in our heart, but number 2 on the roster.
Thanks,
One of the things that I was always impressed by is taking some of that business background, you kind of recognize this is, in that case, we were designing, I think, newsletters and we were doing some fundraising, cards or something. But right off the bat, you said, we can pay for this. It is not in our team's best time or interest or expertise to be creating this stuff. And so you spent a little money to hopefully make more money in the back end, right? Or as you make that circle.
Well, yeah, I think there was, it was an interesting kind of shift. So a couple things. When I first started, when I was kind of just getting my bearings, there was a lot of paper to go through, right? A lot of stuff I inherited the person before me was an interim. So I was coming in kind of just on my own to see, and so kind of sorting through things. And one of the things I noticed is when we got into kind of our marketing material, quote unquote, I couldn't figure out what the brochures meant. There were 3 different brochures that didn't look the same. You know, you couldn't tell if one was meant to go to the hospital, because we have that. We have information. We go to the hospital to say, here's what it's like to stay at the Ronald McDonald House and how you can find more information. And we have one that we hand out more to donors and volunteers about how you can get involved and participate in the mission. And, you know, you couldn't quite figure out the vision of that. And so one of the first projects we started at was really looking at how do we make everything look brand that came from the same organization. And that really came back to the company that I worked before, where we had a whole brand department, right? Everything had to be approved. Everything had to be, and I only know that because one time I didn't get something approved and then I got kind of in trouble, but that's fine.
Haven't we all gotten in trouble by the brand police once or twice?
You got to try the, ask forgiveness method a few times, right?
You got to test where the barriers are, right? Test where the boundaries are.
Well, and who you can trust to not tell somebody that you're doing.
Well, that too.
Just kidding. That's just kidding. But, I think when you're learning and you're trying to figure those things out, you learn some of those things. But I think, coming from a company where their brand was really pretty well known, it was very focused, they had a vision. You started to see how a small business needs that as well. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I think a lot of people don't know about Ronald McDonald House as well is that we're part of an overall system. There's Ronald McDonald Houses all over the world, but we all operate as independent 501c3s here in the US. And so and that is great. It gives us flexibility to do what is most important here in Fargo, Moorhead. But it can make branding a challenge when you're not all doing the same thing. And so I think we've really, as a system, tried to do that. But over the course of things, trying to make things look more professional, I think makes people expect that now. And so I think as I moved in here, wanting to up our level of professionalism, but also recognizing we were in territory. I mean, I didn't come from marketing design. Like, I don't have graphic design background. I don't know how to make things look professional. I know how to tell other people what I'm looking for and hope that we can come to an end product that we like. And so that's where I think it was really important for us to find partners that could help us scale without bringing someone on full time. We didn't have that kind of capacity financially, and we didn't have that kind of capacity for workload. So to find a company we could partner with that understood our vision of how do we tell our story in a way that invites people in was really helpful. And also I think, trends change, right? Like when I started, it was like this dark, everything was dark. And then we went to like the white, right? Everything got really bright. And now we're back into more of a...
Now we have color coming back into our lives.
Yeah,
and like
color's coming back in.
It's really nice.
More like movement, like movies and everything on one page again. Because like scrolling, right? Like... so as things change and how, as electronics change and things, you've got to stay up with that so you're not frustrated. Because like one of my biggest pet peeves is an out-of-date website. Like it's got to look nice and it's got to have accurate information. Or how is that helpful?
Amen. This is like, I want to be very, very clear. Like this is not intended to be like a testimonial.
Right.
But I realized it was starting to go down that path.
I did not get paid to tell people this information.
I am an unpaid actor. No, but I think one of the things that I've so loved about the work that we get to do together is that you guys get it. You get that like story connects people. And I think part of that is because you guys see that every day, right? Just in the conversations that happen around the dinner table, the conversations that happen around the cookie pile, right? That like you see how story connects. And like we were able to work together. And again, somehow I'm going to have to figure out how to cut this so it doesn't sound like that. But like I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you've kind of taken that understanding that like that one-to-one story that connects like you with a donor, you being able to tell a story of a family, of a parent who is able to connect with another parent, or a sibling who gets to play in the playroom or go to the magic room or any of those different things. How you've also translated that to a broader audience to be able to give people kind of a sneak peek behind the doors that makes them connected and really like invest them in the work that you do.
When I think there's so many things we can relate to as humans. I I think, you go back to my college days, I remember taking, like, side note, remember taking dance class in college. I think it was a requirement to take some sort of athletic adventure. And I don't know if you know this about me, not super athletic. So I took a dance class with some friends, and like one of my friends would be like, okay, where are the stories? Like, you always have a story. Like, I like that idea of, relating things through stories and, oh, this happened or this happened and you won't believe what this happened. And, kind of an open book when it comes to like embarrassing moments in my life and all of those kind of things. But when you can take that, I think there's things that everybody can relate to, right? Like, we've all done something embarrassing, or we've all had that moment where we haven't seen someone for a long time, and then you get to see them and you give them this big hug and it really feels good. Or, somebody asks you or smiles or asks you about your day in a positive way. And like, those are things you remember that make you feel good. And so when you look at, like, often when people ask me, one of my favorite things, I said, it's when people get to go home, because you get to see it on their face, that excitement, nervousness. Sometimes they're really nervous. But, when I took my babies home from the hospital, I got to go home after 2 days, just a quote unquote normal birthing experience. These families haven't gotten that. And so, what they had visioned and what they had planned and what you dreamed of as you headed down that road isn't what happened for them. So when they're all of a sudden getting that moment, anything we can do to share that and say, you made this possible, like, you're helping them get that moment that we all dream of. And those are really powerful moments. And so anything you can do to tell that, but I think people can relate to that, right? You can relate to two friends, like little friends playing in the playroom and making friends and, watching kids become fast friends. Like, wasn't it fun when you could walk into a playground and like, you were just friends for like 30 minutes? You were friends with everybody on that playground. And like, you would call them that, right? Like, you'd be like, hey, my friend. And they'd be like, what's your friend's name? I don't know. Doesn't matter. We're friends. But then you'd walk away and be like, okay, bye. Like, probably never see you again, but it's all great. So I think those are the things that, trying to just show that it really is a normal place in a really abnormal time.
Yeah. So as this podcast is intended for fellow brands and causes, small businesses, nonprofits, to either get inspired to start sharing their own stories, or, maybe they're already doing it and they just need some advice. What advice do you have for a fellow nonprofit that is trying to share their story with donors or the people that they help in their mission? What advice do you have?
I think one of the biggest things that I like to share is you just don't overthink it. I think a lot of times we want to put together the perfect brochure or the perfect social media post or you're going to make mistakes. Like, there's going to be spelling errors. There's going to be, but when I, before coming to Ronald McDonald House, worked at a place, and one of the leaders there would say, good enough, press on. And it was, as a recovering perfectionist coming out of college, I think it was so powerful. I hated it at first. I'm not going to lie. I was like, no, it needs to be great. And she was like, but there comes a point where the scale you're going to get over making it from 90% to 100, you're not going to get that output out of that. Like, it's not going to matter. And, so this kind of good enough press on of, I think we can sit and wait and say, oh, we want that pledge form to be perfect before I go talk to the donor. I need to have the perfect family story and picture. And they don't need that just to get started. Because the other thing, one of the things I think we did really well during our capital campaign was we made things really flexible. Because after you go out and talk to a few people, you might say, hey, everyone seems to ask about this question, which we didn't have in there. Maybe we can make a handout about that or tweak it a little bit to change this, or, made it flexible so we could alter as we went and be that kind of flexible piece of it. So I think it's just, you got to just do it. And you have to write something out. I think from a social standpoint, you've got to put content out there, whatever it is. It might be, for us, it might be a national day that resonates with our mission, and it might be, a family story, or it might be a volunteer group, or it might be, just put something out there. So you're reminding people, you've got to keep top of mind. And I think that's one of the things where it can feel overwhelming. But if you can block out some time, once a month and say, these are the days I want to post. There are services, online softwares. I don't know. You're the expert in those terminology part of this deal. I'm clearly not. But that can help you. They can help you say, okay, these are things where you can take, 1 hour and block out a bunch of messages. And yeah, you can tweak those. You can go in and delete them. You can move them to different days. You can go on the fly. But I think it forces you to think about it ahead of time in a way that's more digestible. So, but yeah, do it. You just go.
Yeah.
I think that's
I think
important.
that's super smart. We at Tellwell, we talk about not being perfect, not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, right?
Yep.
So same type of concept, and that is really it's not just hard for recovering perfectionists, but it's really hard for creatives because creatives just love, and we get so invested in the work that we're doing that sometimes we even forget that there's like a greater purpose behind this individual piece, right? And that purpose, in the case of a Ronald McDonald House, is like our goal is to drive people to love, right? Like connect with the organization, but then 2, turn that connection into cash.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Put their cash out there to support this mission. And so I do know that sometimes we get caught up in that as well.
I think we all do. And at some level, like, you kind of, I wouldn't want to be so like blasé that I just didn't care, so I think it shows a passion behind what we do. And I think that's important too, but you don't want it to block your forward movement.
Yeah. So I think one thing that you guys have also done that I think other people can learn from is the evolution of your signature event, the Sweetheart Ball.
Oh, yeah.
The Sweetheart Ball is an incredible event. I have been fortunate enough to be a part of it for probably like 12 or 13 years now. But it's just this really incredible night of celebration, of connection, of sharing stories. And I feel like there was a pretty specific time where you guys pivoted from a very like informational time with a little bit of content and connection over to this more like experiential side where you guys use story to actually connect the different parts of it, whether that be through a song with video or photos in the background, or video that is talking about various stories throughout the generations of Ronald McDonald House. Can you talk a little bit about that transition, and also maybe like get down to brass tacks, like, is the money that you're investing into that elevation paying off?
Yeah, absolutely. I can talk about it. So first of all, full disclosure, the evolution of this event is because I hired good people. So like, while I would love to take full credit for it, there's a lot of people on our team, 2 in particular, a previous employee and the current person with that
you
job.
can talk about them.
Can I say their names?
Safe space here. Yeah.
I mean, but when you go from Erica to Jaquel, and funny story, 2 redheads.
2 sassy redheads.
2 sassy redheads, and every team needs a redhead, right?
Oh, man.
I think every, but Jaquel would say only one. Like, just kidding. But I think when you look at what they did, and I think one of the things we did really well is every year when the event is done, we sit down and, I mean, we're kind of brutal on ourselves, right? Like, what went well, what didn't go well, and really trying to think of the experience from the attendee, So the parts where I can be pretty funny, like risk manager, like annoying probably, is thinking about how do you find your way? Where's your wayfinding? How do you know where to go, where to register, where to go to the bar, where to go to get your raffle ticket or whatever we're doing, whatever game we're playing? How does that person who's never been to this event know how to do that? And so every year we kind of look at and say, okay, who was a first timer as a board member or an attendee? And we, talk to them afterwards and say, what was confusing? What didn't make sense? And so I think that really helped us to evolutionize our ask, the what we call the mission moment, where we have our cash ask. How do we make sure people understand that that's coming? How do we make sure that they understand why that's so important? I think we, found it when you're talking about storytelling, there is power in hearing a family story. That has always been an element of this event. What we have changed is how that's presented. There was a time where we had the family come and speak, which was lovely. But it can be really nerve-wracking. If you, right now we have 650 people that attend the event. There are very few people that have talked in front of 650 people. There's even fewer that love it or don't get nervous.
And I would say even fewer than that. There has to be a minuscule amount that is both emotionally, but also like just objectively prepared to share the worst moments of their life.
Correct. Absolutely. And so one of the things, by working actually with you guys, we've made these incredible videos that can really share the family story. And then we're able to include them in other ways in the event. So they're still there. They're still able to be part of the night, actually be present. But, that takes a level of stress out for them to have to talk in front of those people. And then I think we've been able to incorporate them in different ways. This year we had Clara, and she made a piece of art that was the first thing we sold on our live auction. So we told their story in video form and then invited them on stage. And she told, she just held up this piece of art and then brilliantly egged people on, which was adorable. And she is sassy and awesome, and Clara is fantastic. But, it just... you give them a way to participate in a way that's more comfortable than standing up in front of all those people and trying to talk about, again, a very sensitive time in their life. So I think that has evolutionized. I think event production has really come light years in the 14 years that I've been part of the Sweetheart Ball. I think as you've looked at what we can do. And so there's an investment to that, right? And so to go back to your question, the investments we have made have paid off handsomely. We really had a goal. We had a goal to be a top 5 event in town. I like to think we're there. I don't know how you measure that, but that's what we're shooting for, right? We want to be a ticket that people want to find and to attend. And then we want people to come back. And so what we're looking at every year is how many new people were there, how many people came back. And if somebody didn't come back, are they just busy? Did something come up, or did something happen? And so, again, all of that feedback we're going to afterwards and talking to our committee and our board and attendees and what happened and trying to figure out what went well and what didn't. And and then being very we're still frugal. So while we're spending money, I think we're trying to make partnerships that bring value back to the organization. And so even if we're spending money, we're trying to make partnerships there a long time. And then, some cool things that we're able to do, like this year, the hotel that we work with, we had them, they asked if they could provide the meal at the house that night. So the meal,
so cool.
So the meal we ate at the Sweetheart Ball was the meal that our families ate at the house that night. And it was fabulous. The food was really good this year. And but a cool piece for their team too, to know not only are they feeding 650 people in the room, but they fed 50 to 60 people back at the Ronald McDonald House meatloaf as well. And, and then also can tie that in, right? Meatloaf seems like a weird thing to maybe serve at a banquet meal, but that's what people want at the Ronald McDonald House. And we try to provide a meal every night. And so when you can make those connections with your event to bring it back to mission, right? We're eating meatloaf here, and that's what our families are eating as well. It brings all of those little pieces can add to it. So I think it's just, a lot of things in evolution. And I think, making the event experience. When you walk in the door, is it pretty? Is it catching your eye? And all of those things, have just added to the experience. So.
Well, I think one thing that I love about what you do and how you do it is, as you even talk about, we're trying to put ourselves in the place of the first time event attendee. Right. And you're trying to think through where are our shortcomings? What do they not know? How do we fill that hole so that way they can come into this with as much knowledge as they need to have an incredible time? You do the same thing with your families, right? Even by having your family support associates. Is that their name?
Yeah, absolutely. Family Services Associates.
Family
Hey, that was
Services.
impressive. Yeah.
Thank you. But even having them to kind of guide them through, you always have so many volunteers to do the same thing, to be like, hey, are you lost? Do you not know what's going on? Look for the person with a balloon tied to their wrist, right?
Yeah.
And they're all over. And so you create those really amazing experiences. Can you talk just a little bit about why it is important to maybe minimize the uncertainty and how that translates both to fundraising and events,
Yeah.
but also to your mission.
Well, I mean, I think all of us can relate to, like, I don't like to be uncomfortable in a new space. Like, I don't like to walk into something and not know what's going on. It makes me very uncomfortable. And I think, I think there are times where people can say, well, you seem very confident. And I was like, well, yes, but there are moments I have great insecurity, right? Like, that's just humanity. That's what we are as humans. However, we can minimize that. So, if we're a welcoming, at the Ronald McDonald House, if we're a welcoming face at the door, you smile and you say hello, let's sit down. In our welcoming office, we have a fridge that has water in it. We have toys for your kids. So if you're coming in as a mom and dad, maybe you haven't slept. If you're experiencing all of this uncertainty, you don't know what's happening. And we're trying to give you one piece that doesn't add to that. It just lets you focus on those and working on those things. So, having areas for your kids, we're even looking at, adding more therapy type toys for kids, right? If they're having trouble expressing, how can we help support that? Fidgets or things that can help mom and dad focus on the things they need to take their mind off things, gives, all of the different things. So we try to provide that experience. And then, we are staffed 24 hours a day. So we want to make sure you can always ask someone a question. You can always ask that. We have our fully stocked pantry, so you don't have to worry about food. If you can't afford it, if you don't know where the grocery store is because you're not from Fargo, you don't have to worry about it. At 2 a.m, you want to make some macaroni and cheese? We probably have it. So go check it out, make some, find a pot and pan and do whatever you need to do. Those things, really trying to fit a family schedule, knowing that they're really out of sorts. You might see families, we always kind of joke a little bit that there's kind of two types, right? You have someone who maybe has no words left to say when they get back from the hospital. They just need to decompress. And so they will kind of come in the side and they will be very quiet and they'll go to the room and you might not see them the rest of the night. They might grab a plate of food, and then you have some that come back and they really need to process that through. So having someone that they can say, I just need to tell you about my day. And if the day was bad, have someone say, I'm really sorry that your day wasn't great. I hope tomorrow's better. Or is there anything that I can do to make things better right now? Is there something that I can help you find something, or do you just need a listening ear? Or to celebrate those wins, right? When something comes back and it goes really, really good, to have someone who says that's really exciting and truly understand what that means, right? To have your last cancer treatment or to get the news that you have a date that you're going home with your brand new baby that's been in the NICU for 3 weeks. Like all of those things are things that we understand at a different level than maybe a hotel would, just because that's not their job, right? It's not their job to understand. And then I think when you go back to our event, it's the same feeling, right? You want to make people feel welcome. You want to make people feel like they understand what's happening and who they can go to for help and how things work, because we want them to have fun and we want them to be able to focus on having fun.
I love that. Just a couple more questions, but I think as we kind of go through this, you're a lifelong learner. Like you love to consume content. I know that about you personally, but I'd be really curious, what kind of content are you consuming right now? Podcasts, blogs.
Yeah. So have a couple things that I get every day, a couple emails I get every day. One in the afternoon is more nonprofit focused. They're both through, now you put me on the spot and I'm going to have to think about this for a second.
We can leave them in the show notes. It's fine.
So the one in the morning is on leadership and it just ties you into a bunch of different articles, quick reads, which for right now where I'm at in my personal life and my career, quick reads are really great. Things, because then I can dig in farther and say, okay, I want to learn more. Just read Make Your Bed. It's a book about, So again, we'll put it in the show notes because I can't think of his name, but it's a general with military guy, Navy.
Yeah.
He spoke at it. He did a speech for a college graduation and it's the book about it. Just kind of an interesting book, very different. I was not from a military family. And so, some things that were very different than what I knew. But I've been joking with my husband every morning and I was like, first thing you do, make your bed. So I'm always like, make her bed. We got to make her, I'm a bed maker. So he kind of.
I'm not.
You aren't?
I'm not.
Oh, I just love it. But I see this is probably too, I share too much.
That's all right.
But I get out of bed early before. And so can't make it when somebody else is still in there, but I can joke about it. I'm going to make my bed and make it right over your head. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so that was one. Podcasts. Let's see. What have I been listening to lately? Oh yeah, there's an HR one. HR manager. It's like 3 HR managers, and it's really kind of interesting. Lifelong learners. So there's always kind of something I'm reading. There's always a list of books. My list of books that I would like to read is longer than I will ever get to, but I think
my bedside stack is like unrealistic for an entire year.
Mine is epic right now. And then every once in a while I have to like get real to say like, okay, I need to manage this in a way that's going to work. And it's such a mixture, right? Like my podcast that I'm going to read are like a mixture of, I think there's a World War II one in there right now about somebody who went missing. There's like some true crime in there, of course. And then there's some learning ones, right? Like, so there's just such an interesting mix of things and how you can do that. But yeah, so always something going on. And then there's a book I've been trying to read, but I haven't made much progress, like a for fun book. But the problem is why I keep stopping picking up is I just know I won't be able to finish. I like stop once I start. And so I really need to know that I have that kind of time in my schedule.
I get that.
To commit, or I might not sleep. I might just read it all in one day, which I have very many times been known to do.
Well, I definitely want you back on the podcast at some point to have more of a conversation about leadership, because
absolutely.
I think you're one of the most incredible like leaders that I know, and you influence your team in a way that's really inspiring. And so like I definitely want to get you back on to talk about that. But as we kind of wrap up today, kind of like 2 final questions. The first one is, as you think about your 14 years at the Ronald McDonald House, think about your careers before that kind of influenced being a badass business bee in the nonprofit space, and really kind of setting a new standard for how nonprofits run in this community. But even beyond that, the number of families that you serve on a yearly basis, the number of lives that you've impacted, the number of parents and mouths that you've fed under your leadership. What are you grateful for?
One of the things for me that is so incredible is that I get to stand at this front door of generosity in this community. And it consistently blows my mind that people give of their time and their money to help someone they've never met. They probably will never meet. Somebody who's just, and it's not just us. Like, I mean, days like Giving Hearts Day or Christmas time. I mean, it's amazing to watch what will come in the door just because of a post we put on Facebook or a call out. We're almost out of paper towels, and they show up in droves. I mean, it just melts you. And I think for me to get to stand in this unique vantage point to watch that, it's inspiring for me as a human to live a more generous life, right? Like, not just because of what I do, but what I get to watch other people do, and that kind of cool part of watching people's donor relationships grow and get more generous, or watching them not only give to us, but a bunch of other people in town. I think it's a really cool vantage point that I get. And I'm incredibly grateful for that.
Incredible. You're fantastic. I so appreciate you being on. How can people support the Ronald McDonald House? How can they support today? How can they support in the future?
Absolutely. Volunteering is a great way to get in. We have people who come in and cook meals. That calendar does fill up. So if that's something that interests you, I definitely encourage you to go sign up. Call us earlier rather than later. But there's always something. I mean, if volunteering is, if there's some talent you have, I mean, we're always looking for people that might want to play music or fix, if you're handy, like, and you want to fix something, there's a lot of opportunity that way. Obviously donations make a big difference. And it can be, money, of course. We need to pay our bills. We need to, the city water needs to be paid, and the light bill needs to be, all of that stuff needs to be done. But also you have things that make it more comfortable. So we're using that to make sure we have food for our families and staff 24 hours a day, and all of the things that make sure that our families are well taken care of. We have paper towels, like silly things too, paper towels, a toothbrush, things that you might have, if you go on a trip and you've forgotten something, chances are we have that stocked in our basement because the people who come to us forget that too. Because often, they might not know that they were coming to Fargo. They, it might be a middle of the night. It might be, we've had families where things were looking fine and then all of a sudden they weren't fine, and you're on the helicopter or a plane and your child's heading to Fargo and you're still processing what's happened. So we want to make sure we have everything that they need. And then sometimes, if you didn't imagine you were going to have a NICU baby, we have clothes. We try to have diapers. We have clothes, all of the things. Again, as a mom, I have forgotten almost everything because I can be kind of forgetful with that stuff. Or there's always like one thing on the list I didn't remember. So, diapers and wipes and all of those things that you might run out of or need because money might be tight. And so we're just trying to make that experience really something that families can focus on what matters most in getting their child well. So there's lots of opportunities.
Incredible. Jill Christopher, thanks for joining us for Pride Stories, the podcast. We're grateful that you are one of our very favorite story makers, and we're so grateful for the work that you guys do every day for our community and really our entire region. So,
thank you. Fun to be here.
Hey, story makers, thanks for listening to Tellwell the podcast. We're so excited that you tuned in for this episode. If you found this episode helpful, if you got any nuggets of wisdom from it, we'd love for you to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how this message gets out. If you're interested in having Tellwell help you share your story, just reach out to us at wetellwell.com or reach out in the comments. We'll make sure that we're listening and we will reach back out. On behalf of my co-host Duncan Williamson and myself, thanks so much for being a story maker, and keep sharing your stories.
If we hold tight, we can chase the Mississippi through the night, hundreds of miles away.